Hey there, welcome back to the channel. This will be a part 2 of the BMW S62 swap into my BMW E46. Within this video, I'm going to install the new rod bearings and also some timing chain guides. Let's do it. As far as these replacement parts for this project, they were all sourced from FCP Euro. I've been shopping with them for years, an amazing company that offer OEM parts with lifetime warranties. So, originally, I was going to only service the rod bearings for this engine, and I was going to skip over the timing chain guides for now, due to budget reasons. However, after further checking in the engine, I decided to double check the oil pump. You can remove this screen cover here by unfastening these 5mm bolts. And this pops off. You can see the entire screen. What I found was indeed timing chain pieces, or timing chain guide pieces rather. They are not totally failed, but these small chunks, they're destined to totally fail, so I have to replace them now. This engine having 174,000 miles, these things should last the same, if not longer now. When it comes to the OEM rod bearings, the wear patterns being so consistent made me feel more confident on my choice of rod bearing replacement. I'm using just OEM rod bearings, and I'm going to use OEM rod bolts too. Now, when it comes to the timing chain guides here, when it comes to this one for the S62 engine, it is on national backorder. This one right here is from an M60 engine. It has the same width here. So we simply remove this plastic bit from this frame and we snap it onto the frame of the S62. The only modification needed is to drill additional holes for oiling the chain, which I'm not sure where they go just yet, but that process will be shown once I get in there. This one here is the one that typically fails, okay? These little tabs here will snap off, and that's what you end up finding in your crankcase and oil pump and stuff. Worst case scenario is this plastic here will actually get worked and slide right off this metal frame whenever all these tabs break. And here is the third timing chain guide. So before replacing the rod bearings, I want to spin the engine right side up and remove the spark plugs so there's no compression, making the engine easier to spin over by hand. I'm going to get just hold that, I want to get something for leverage.
Okay. That's definitely big and girthy.
Yeah.
Is it going like this?
Yep.
Okay.
Keep going.
Oh, okay.
Keep going. Straight. Okay, so the first step to getting access to spark plugs is remove this cover here, which shields the ignition coils. 2 10mm. These are made out of some sort of metal. Looks like magnesium or aluminum, perhaps. Now I'm going to open up the clasps of the ignition coils to get the harness undone. Flathead screwdriver and just prying up like that. And now we have 2 more 10mm fasteners holding the harness to the valve cover. We're going to have 2 more additional 10mm bolts holding the grounds to the valve cover. There's actually 3 of them. There's one back here too, another ground wire. And now all these ignition coils are bolted down, once again with 10mm nuts. And now these ignition coils simply pull right out. And now we have access to the spark plugs. I'm going to refasten these so they're not just like flopping around while we rotate the engine back over.
You don't want it to flop around?
No.
Oh.
I want it to be stiff and firm.
Okay, you want it not flaccid.
Yes.
Got you.
Push on it. It's gonna spin. Oh. All right.
Looks good.
You okay?
Yeah.
So when it comes to the rod bearings themselves, there are 2 different part numbers, and they're also color-coded. The blue-colored bearing, see that mark there? This is the upper shell, meaning go on the connecting rod. The lower one will be marked with red. So you can see the red marking on that bearing. So that will go into the cap side of the connecting rod, and it'll be just like that. Just to be certain, we measured each bearing shell to check their consistency, and they're all pretty much spot on, so we are okay to proceed. So we're going to measure the clearance of at least one cylinder using plastic gauge, which is this plastic material. You cut small sections of this, lay it directly onto the crankshaft journal. You then put your bearings in and torque the bolts to spec. This plastic will get crushed, okay? And whatever it gets crushed to, you compare that to the gauge, which is printed right to the paper here. So for this application, we're looking for a clearance of anything between 0.025 and 0.067 millimeters. I'm going to begin by working with these cylinders back here, 7 and 8. So here is the journal for the crank. Bastard. So here is the journal for the crankshaft. I'm going to make sure it is clean and dry so we get the most accurate reading as possible for the plastic gauge. So these connecting rods, being known as cracked rods, the caps must go back on the exact same way you take them off. So cylinder 8 I had facing this way, as I marked them all so I know. Once again, the red marked bearing shells are for the cap side. There's going to be some cutouts here for a little tab or tang, whatever you want to call it, on the bearing shell. That will go on the same side as the cutout. Just like that. And then same thing on the connecting rod side or the piston side. There's also going to be some square cutouts on the bottom of the connecting rod for another tab or tang on the upper shell, which once again is marked in blue. And now I'm going to pull up the connecting rod to contact the crankshaft. Just like that. It is now time to install this connecting rod cap, torque it down, and then check our clearance. If you look closely, you can see the plastic gauge. There's a chunk right there laid on the journal of the crankshaft. We're going to crush that and see what our clearance is. For this procedure, we're going to reuse the original connecting rod bolts because there's no reason to stretch out the new ones just yet. So when it comes to the first pass, 5 newton meters is around 3 foot-pounds, around that range. It's basically just hand tight, just to get the initial seating of the parts here. We'll call that around 5 newton meters. So for the second torque pass, we need to tighten these to 20 newton meters. So as you can see here, the torque wrench is now set to 20 newton meters. We're now going to switch this to degrees by tapping a button. We need to bring this up to 65. And there we go, 65 degrees. So now that we have this connecting rod fully torqued down, we're going to re-loosen these bolts, and then we're going to check the clearance for the bearing. And now you can see how the plastic gauge has been smashed. See that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And now you can clearly see that this plastic gauge is just right about 0.051 millimeters. And once again, our spec was 0.025 to 0.067 millimeters. As you can see, we are right in the middle of that range. It is wise to clean off the plastic gauge. You do not want to leave that on there. You also want to clean it off the rod bearing as well. Here we have some assembly lubricant. We're going to apply it directly to the bearings. And here we have some brand new connecting rod bolts, as The originals, they are one-time use. Before installing these brand new bolts, there's one more important step. You must lubricate the threads, and I found that 10W40 makes a great thread lubricant, whether it's head bolts or, in this case, these bolts. Let it drip once or twice, and that should be good to go. And now, judging off the original rod bearings, how they were evenly worn for the most part, and after measuring the new rod bearings, I'm going to go ahead and just install them all without checking any more. As the first one checked out great, all the measurements checked out good, so we should be good to go. And there we go. We now have all of the rod bearings installed. Okay, it is now time to begin disassembly for timing chain guide replacement. First step being valve cover removal. We have some 10mm fasteners here, looks to be 11, and we're going to have a nut underneath here for this positive jump point. This will be a 19mm. We also must remove these rails here. Now apparently they are side specific, so you must mark them. We can now remove these Vanos feed lines. Now we can remove this feed block for the Vanos. Wow, that's really stuck on there. Jeez, there we go. Right there. Okay, so now with these things removed, we're going to reinstall the crankshaft pulley so we can spin the engine. I am now going to rotate the crankshaft by hand to place the engine at top dead center. meaning cylinder 1 will be at the very top of the compression stroke. So whenever cylinder 1 is truly at top dead center, you'll have these cam lobes facing upward, meaning the valves in the head are totally shut. After verifying that, we can now lock this crankshaft with the pin. The crankshaft should now be locked. It definitely is. Now, working at the camshafts, we're going to grab a hold of them and move them back and forth to bleed off any pressure in the Vanos system. And then we're going to spin the camshafts counterclockwise until they stop. So it seems like in my case that these camshafts are locked up tight and there's no movement. I now realize that there is still oil pressure within these Vanos units. So I do believe if I crack open this cap right here, it will relieve oil pressure. So I'm going to loosen this. And here you can see we now have some oil leaving the Vanos. Oh, there it went. That was it. We had too much oil still in the Vanos. Perfect. Oh, and by the way, using an adjustable wrench is way better than using pliers on your camshaft. This is also a 27mm wrench size, but in this instance, this will work just fine. I borrowed this from my good friend, Jaron. Thanks, man. Now we're going to remove this lock pin. Now we will rotate the crankshaft one full revolution to where these marks line up, meaning we will be one complete revolution away from true TDC. We're now going to loosen these bolts here for the Vanos hubs. They are a 10mm wrench. Not the whole way out, you're just cracking them loose until they become totally loose in your hand. It is now time to rotate the crankshaft again to put it back to true TDC. Doing that has now exposed the remaining bolts to loosen. After loosening these bolts, these camshafts have free play now. We need to line up the windows cut into the camshafts with the holes right here. We will then lock the cams once they line up. If you don't have the proper cam locking tools, alternatively, you can use an 8mm bolt. There it goes. So that cam is now locked. And here's a better shot of the window in the camshaft. You can see the bolt entering it through there. That is what holds the camshaft in place. Actually, whenever it comes to bolts, they seem to fit not the best in these cam caps. See that? A little too loose. I even tried to use a shanked bolt and cut the threads off thinking it would be a little tighter, but no, still loose. I had to find something. I found this metal rod. This was in an E46 toolkit. I think it's to help put the wheels on. I'm not sure. Anyway, I took the handle off of it, and it fits tight. Like, that is what you want right there. That is, see that? That is much tighter. So I'm going to cut this down into 4 pieces. I was also told that drill bits work really well, 8mm drill bits. I also did try a 5/16 drill bit, and it fits pretty dang nice too. Also, whenever it comes to using bolts, keep in mind, this is an aluminum camshaft cap, okay? Bolts are steel. These threads here can potentially mark or cut into the cam cap, as these camshafts will be under tension due to valve springs. They're not always going to be loose like this, okay? They will eventually want to move, and they'll rest in a tensioned position. Another reason why I think bolts are not a good idea for this. We now have the crankshaft locked at TDC, and we have all 4 camshafts now locked in their proper positions. It is now time to remove these Vanos units. We're going to remove these 5mm Allen bolts surrounding the unit. We can now take a tool and insert it right here to pry back the Vanos unit. Same thing on this side. We're now going to grab some wrenches and come from above and grab a hold of this in here. We need a 10 millimeter for this side, and we need a 7 millimeter for the other side over here. Now, this should be reverse thread, meaning righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. There it goes. Now the unit is free to come off. We have a simple plug remaining. Now, when it comes to these gears, they can be removed. Also, when it comes to all four of them, they are the exact same. They do not need marked or anything. Going to now remove these valves right here. Going to now remove this crankshaft pulley once more, and then we can remove the timing covers. Before removing this timing cover, we're going to remove this timing chain tensioner. It is a 19 millimeter. And here we are with direct access to all of the primary timing chain guides. And as suspected, this middle one here was starting to fail. I can see where pieces broke off of it. Here is the brand new timing chain guide. I want you to take notice of this tab and this one. As you'll see, they are missing on the original, which means it was only a matter of time until this plastic totally failed. So here we have the chain guide for the S62 and the one for the M60. This particular replacement is on national backorder, so we're just going to swap the plastics from the M60 onto the S62 frame. I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and I'm going to go right here and pry this up just a little bit so the plastic can come off. There it goes. Slide it back. And there we go. There's our brand new plastic. And here's the original. Going to also remove the plastic. If this breaks, it does not matter. Yes, that was pretty brittle. Before throwing this away, you do want to note that there are little oiling holes on the tip of my thumb right there and right there. They are being fed from this area right here. There's an O-ring sealing it, and there's little feed holes right there. As oil travels through this stem, it then feeds this bracket, and it sprays oil out. And here we go. I now have my modified M60 plastic. I only drilled one hole in the center because I don't have a drill bit quite small enough to do all three, and I didn't want to weaken this plastic too much. This part, brand new from BMW, apparently there is no holes to begin with, so if brand new there's no holes, I think 1 out of the 3 should be okay. Gonna put this on. There we go, that is now on. I am also going to take this brand new O-ring from this bracket and put it onto the S62 assembly. Just like that. When it comes to this final chain guide here, it will contact the head gasket if you try to pull it straight off of the pins which are bolted into the engine. So I'm actually going to loosen this one down here from the block the whole way out, and that will let me swing this down like this to potentially avoid this part of the head gasket, and that should give me enough room. And there we go. This is now free from the block, and there is a washer. I do not want to lose that. I'm going to watch up here as I spin it, and then pull it straight. Oh yeah, just like that. That's how you get that one out. Then this will just pull out of here like that. And there we go. We now have brand new timing chain guides installed onto this engine. Well, as far as this video goes, I believe I'm finished. Please join me in part 3 as we reassemble the engine and discuss parts to make it fit in the E46 chassis. Also, during reassembly, we'll be using these parts that have been cleaned. Check those out. If you found today's video to be useful, knowledgeable, or simply entertaining for you, please consider subscribing to my... I can never say that in one line. I always mess up this outro. If you found today's video to be useful, knowledgeable, or simply entertaining for you, please consider subscribing to my channel, as I highly appreciate it. I'll see you guys in part 3. Catch you later.